Over the past few months, there's a chance you've come across this silly little cat. He may not have a name, but if you do recognize him, you'd know him as the Flow Cat, who's from, get this, Flow, the animated feature from Latvia that is the first ever independent movie to win Best Animated Feature at the Oscars. It's even getting a Criterion release. Yippee! With the free animation software Blender, $4 million, and a dream, the very small production team was able to create one of the best animated movies of the decade. Flow was directed by Gensel Balotis, and if you can believe it, this is not his first rodeo when it comes to directing a fully length animated movie. That honor goes to his very first directorial feature debut, Away. After creating 7 silent short films, the first one being released when he was only 16 years old, Gents released Away in 2019 and, as you read in the title, was made completely by himself. And when I say everything, I mean everything. He directed, produced, wrote, scored, edited, and even animated the movie. It took him about 3.5 years to complete with a budget of around 50,000 euros, or about $56,000. It's a crazy small budget for a movie, let alone an animated one, and it was done a bit faster than your average mainstream animated movie, which usually takes about 4 to 5 years to complete. Not to mention, he started it when he was just 20 years old, and he used another free animation software, Maya. The reasoning as to why he single-handedly created it is stated in an interview he did on a Latvian news station. I wanted to make the film myself because I wanted to learn all the elements of filmmaking. I think the best way to learn is to try it yourself. Away won the very first Contrachamp Award from Annecy, the largest film festival for animation, and is dedicated to avant-garde and/or experimental films. Even video game legend Hideo Kojima praised it back in 2020 by saying, "These feelings of nostalgia, the unknown away feeling, I find it irresistible. This is another Death Stranding." But what is it about, you may ask? Well, a young boy survives a plane crash and is left stranded on an island. Stranding, get it. Is there any chance the airline was oceanic? Who's to say? Anyway, he journeys across it to get help, all while befriending a small yellow chick and a mysterious dark spirit stalking him. And just like Flow, it doesn't have any dialogue, the main character has to learn how to survive, it features a large body of water, and it has multiple animal characters, including black cats. And something I love bragging about when it comes to Away is that I knew about Gents and this movie before Flow even came out. I mean, this is like the 3rd video I've mentioned it, for crying out loud. While I do believe Flow is the better movie with its more polished story and art style, I still love Away, so that's why I want to talk about it. Again, it's an animated movie that was made by one single guy. It deserves some credit. The film begins with the young boy finding himself stuck in a tree shortly after he escaped from the plane. Like Flow, the characters don't have names, so I'll just be referring to him as the boy. Just after he wakes up, a dark figure approaches and consumes him. Short movie, but alright. Nah, he finds out the monster is transparent, so he begins booking it through these stone arches as the monster begins following him. It's at this moment the movie is divided into chapters and he discovers the titular forbidden oasis. The monster mysteriously stops at the entrance of it, so the boy is safe for now. There, he finds food, water, a motorcycle, and a backpack full of useful things like a canteen, a map, and the keys to the motorcycle. The place is definitely somewhere I'd like to hang out in. There's these gigantic clover-like plants that make me feel like I'm back in a Bug's Land. The scene is very meditative as he walks around, gets a view of the vast ocean, and takes a swim. This is also where Gents' score begins to shine, particularly with this track titled, get this, Forbidden Oasis. It reminds me a lot of one of my other favorite movies, Song of the Sea, an Irish animated film from 2014 that also features fantastical elements in a large body of water. You can even hear the same motif in both movies. In the oasis, the boy meets a yellow chick who hasn't quite learned how to fly yet, and while figuring out how to drive the motorcycle, he witnesses a flock of white birds migrating, something which will be brought up again later. That night, he discovers the remains of the explorer that came before him, one who was also haunted by the shadowy figure and has spent the rest of their days in solitude. At this point, the boy decides to pack up his things and move on. He zooms right past the monster, who should be thankful it's very slow moving, and rides on to the sunrise. Despite its relatively low stakes, I would consider this to be my favorite chapter of the film. I like its tranquil and laid-back tone, and it has what is probably my favorite track of the score. But the next chapter, Mirror Lake, however, has my favorite scene. The boy and the heron, or whatever, continue making their way through the stone arches in these vast landscapes as the monster is not too far behind. During the scene, after the two of them pass by a fawn, the monster approaches it, and just like what it tries to do to the boy at the beginning, it crouches down into a bubble shape and consumes it. leaving it dead as it walks away. Yeah, so it's basically a Dementor, a dark, shadowy, otherworldly figure that sucks the soul out of any living creature in its wake. It actually tried doing this to the bird earlier and the boy managed to save him, so there is a rule to how long the person/animal has to be consumed by the monster. If it doesn't consume it long enough, then it is able to remain alive. Anyway, RIP Bambi. As the boy and the bird stop to rest, the bird encounters one of the white birds from earlier. After staring at each other for a few moments, the white bird flies off as the yellow one can do nothing but walk closer to the cliff and stay behind, longingly staring at its opportunity to take flight as well. The two then come across a rickety, half-constructed bridge amidst a plethora of balancing rocks, and as the boy tries to push a boulder down to break the bridge and keep the monster away, the white bird comes back to perch itself on the motorcycle, only to fly away right when a white fox appears and begins hunting the yellow bird. Once the boy barely manages to destroy the bridge with the monster on it, that's when the bird falls off the cliff while trying to escape the fox. Oh no! However, the white bird comes back to save it by teaching it how to use its wings properly, so they fly up back to safety. Yippee! Is it a deus ex machina? Sure, but hooray for the bird. After making sure the monster is hidden down in the ravine, hidden under the fog, the two finally make their way to the titular Mirror Lake. I love this scene. After gazing at the small family of elephants walking on water like Jesus, the boy discovers that he too can walk like Jesus, so he rides on top of it. The water is a perfect reflection of the landscape surrounding it as Ginz's score continues to be ethereal as ever. This is where the flock of birds fly past them as it looks like they're completely surrounded by them, and hey, that's the poster shot. However, this is when the yellow bird decides to take flight and join its air buddies. It bids farewell and the flock soars high into the sky, leaving the boy behind in the middle of the lake. Something I would now like to mention is this movie's cinematography. Obviously it's an animated movie, so there isn't an actual camera, but I do love how it's simulated to feel like there is. But first, let's take a side quest and explore how camera movement in animation has evolved over time. In the early 20th century, traditional animation, meaning the old pen and paper and ink and paint, was gifted with the multiplane camera, a camera that was developed by German director Lothar Reiniger, who, if you have watched my stop motion ranking from a while ago, is the first female director of an animated movie, specifically the oldest surviving one, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed from 1926. She developed this camera that has various artwork layers stacked not too far from each other, so depending on how the camera moved, it gives the illusion of depth of field. This technique would later be used and improved upon, being featured in a variety of early Disney movies like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Fantasia. It started to phase out with The Fox and the Hound in 1981 until The Little Mermaid became the very last Disney film to utilize in 1989. At this point, a digital counterpart became the norm as it was part of the technology that both Disney and Pixar had developed called CAPS, the computer animation production system, which would allow hand-drawn characters and painted backgrounds to be digitally scanned, and the camera would be able to move in more dynamic ways, making the world feel, well, three-dimensional. It was first used in the opening scene of The Rescuers Down Under, then in other films from the Disney Renaissance like the dance sequence from Beauty and the Beast, where it really feels like they fit an entire crane into that ballroom just to get that shot, as well as the sanctuary scene from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Camera movements like these bled into non-Disney animated movies like The Prince of Egypt, which were further able to replicate one seen in live-action movies. And actually, Steven Spielberg himself gave his insight of cinematography while The Prince of Egypt was in production. When entirely computer-animated films eventually, inevitably, became the go-to for studios, everything was modeled and rendered digitally, so the camera was able to move easier than ever since it could go anywhere. As animated textures and physics became more realistic, so did the camera techniques. You see this in the opening scene of WALL-E, where the camera follows the titular robot documentary style as if a real person is physically turning the camera lens to zoom in. That's enough of my nerdy yapping, so then how does all of this lead back to Away? Well, if you haven't yet noticed, Ginz takes a similar approach where much of the tracking shots feel handheld with a slight shakiness. Even larger, airborne shots have this, and it actually makes the viewing experience feel like it's done in VR.
I use the camera, which is a very expressive tool, I think. And in 3D animation, I think you have like complete freedom over camera. So I can do these crazy camera moves and I can do these long takes quite easily, which is very difficult otherwise.
The camera in my films is usually not very perfect. It's sometimes shaking and sometimes it's a bit delayed. Hopefully it feels like there's someone actually operating the camera.
I just think it's amazing that technology has progressed so much that a single individual is capable of making an entire animated movie by themselves and not having to join a mega corporation to get their creative vision to the world. Now, of course, that's not a knock on the movies I talked about. Y'all know these are some of my favorites of all time. But I do think we should be giving people the credit they deserve when they decide to take these great challenges. Again, this took Gintz about 3.5 years to make. Something else to point out is that Gintz is a big fan of long tracking shots. You see this throughout the film where I'll follow the boy as he Mazda zooms on his motorcycle, but also during slower paced scenes like when the boy walks around the Forbidden Oasis for the first time. It's also in flow, like when the lemur's introductory scene is over 3.5 minutes long, but it's all shot in one take. Gintz says his inspiration for that comes from Alfonso Cuarón, a Mexican filmmaker known for directing Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Hey, speaking of Dementors, Gravity, Children of Men, Y Tu Mama Tambien, and most recently Roma. Gintz believes long takes like his make the viewing experiences much more immersive and believes it's a great fit for 3D animation, which is why he utilizes them in his own work. But going back to VR, I think it complements the movie as a whole since it really feels like a video game. There's a character exploring these strange lands, gathering supplies and making allies while a mysterious entity tracks them down. The stone arches even feel like checkpoints. My friend William has told me it reminds him of a video game called Grow Home, and just watching the launch trailer, the similarities are there with its simplistic graphics and vast, fantastical world. I really would love to see a video game version of Away and explore places like the Forbidden Oasis and Mirror Lake. Speaking of which, let's get back to that lake. I love this scene because of its ethereality. The score, the lack of dialogue, that shot of the boy being surrounded by birds, it's just lovely to watch. I'm dying to visit a lake like that someday. Moving on, we now start at Chapter 3, Dreamwell. It begins with the boy having a nightmare about the plane crash he survived, slowly drifting down amongst the stars while figures that look like the monster chasing him fall alongside him. Now at this point it's established that he's struggling with survivor's guilt. I mean, he's the only human character we've seen so far after all. There's no implication that he had any friends or family on the plane, but it doesn't mean he can't still be haunted by the fact that he's the sole survivor. Maybe he's not, and a whole bunch of people are stranded on a different part of the island. Who knows? Well, he can't go back to sleep now, so he continues on his journey, going past rocky terrains, forests, and eventually a bamboo forest where he finds... oh my gosh. They're flowcats. Look, there's so many of them. What are those silly little guys doing? Well, they're partaking in a ritual. The boy finds them all silently staring at a hole in the ground when suddenly a geyser spurts out from it. It goes back down and all the cats begin making their way to the bottom as the boy follows them. One by one, the cats take a drink, the boy does the same, and go back up and feel eepy, and so they eep. He dreams about his feathered friend enjoying his time in the sky and wakes up to all the cats sleeping around him. Ah, yes, this is the Dreamwell. And fun fact, that's the name of the studio Gintz founded to produce Flow. How cool. Speaking of which, before the boy falls asleep, he comes across this small, dilapidated structure, and it actually reminds me of Lemur's home from Flow. Maybe Gintz did this intentionally, subconsciously, who's to say? Eventually the rest of the cats wake up, so he hangs around. We get the sickest shot to ever grace cinema. A cat riding a tortoise. Look at him go! But soon after the geyser spurts up again, the cats go down, take a drink, the boy follows and fills up his canteen, but instead of falling asleep, he quietly leaves them to continue his quest. But he takes a drink and rests later that night. Must be some seriously powerful NyQuil or something. This dream, however, may be more of a vision, since it's about the birds discovering that the monster's alive and he's not stopping his conquest. Guess the boy better get a move on, but it's not long before he approaches the plane wreckage. I suppose seeing dead bodies would be too gruesome, so he instead hallucinates seeing the dark figures in the fuselage. It begins raining, so while he waits it out, he takes another sip of the Dreamwell water and passes out again. Oh my gosh, is he stupid? It cuts to the birds following the monster, where they all stumble upon the sleeping cats, and the monster begins soul-sucking the cats. No! The yellow bird witnesses his new friends around him quite literally drop like flies. The geyser seems to interrupt the soul-sucking as the monster stands back up to watch as the yellow bird frantically flies away. This is the very last shot we see of the cats, and they're still on the ground, so I'm just gonna hope and pray they're still sleeping. But this brings us to the fourth and final chapter of the film, Cloud Harbor. According to the map, the boy is close to civilization, so he proceeds to make it up the mountain. However, he passes out, probably because he's wearing a t-shirt in the snow, and the monster finally catches up to him. It begins its soul-sucking, and we get a look as to what exactly it does to a potential victim. The boy slowly falls down a black, then orange abyss, which at this point looks like the Vertigo poster, and right before he succumbs to it, the yellow bird comes back to save him in return, which defeats the monster. Hooray! The boy wakes up and sees that he's almost at the harbor, but unfortunately, the defeat initiated an avalanche. Arnar! So he begins out racing it, don't question it, and seeing the last stone arch on the edge of the cliff, he has no choice but to go through it and jump off. He lost his motorcycle, but it doesn't matter now. He's lucky the gas lasted for that long. He swims up to the surface where the bird meets him, starts going towards shore, and help arrives. Roll credits. That's right, all 20 seconds worth. At just an hour and 15 minutes, that, my dear fellow kids, is away. So what do I think about the movie overall? Is it the most complex, Megamind, galaxy brain animated movie out there? No. When it comes to analyzing this film, there's honestly so much you can do. The monster symbolizes death, the boy struggles with survivor's guilt, perhaps you can view the boy almost succumbing to the monster in the climax as an allegory for depression or even some kind of addiction before he's saved just in time, and I think that's kind of it. But hey, good thing Flow exists. Flow's an improvement on what Gin started to explore in a way with its more layered story and detailed animation. The characters especially are a lot more expressive than the boy, but again, there's a difference between a crew and an individual working on a movie. And while the dilapidated structure may be a bit of a stretch when it comes to referencing Away, there is a definite one in the score with one of the tracks being called Flow Away. But going back to Away, although I do understand its rather lukewarm score on Letterboxd, I love this movie for its atmosphere, soundtrack, and immersive environments. It has a simple story, but I think it's executed very well. There's beauty in its simplicity. However, did I spoil the entirety of this obscure movie to everyone watching this video? Sure. But still, I highly recommend it, once again in order to give this single-handed creation its flowers. I'm making this video for this exact reason. If you wish to do so, which you freaking better, it's available to watch on Prime Video, as well as Tubi, completely for free. Wow! But another reason to watch this is to support Gin Sabaloda specifically. I became so eager to see what he would have in store next, and lo and behold, Flow came out a year and a half later. It was incredible seeing the little kitty that could end up on such a large platform like the Oscars. I'm so incredibly proud of him, and I cannot wait to see what this means for Latvian and indie animation as a whole. Here's to many more in and out trips. Congrats, King. You deserve it. So what's Gin's next movie? Well, it's called Limbo, and he says it's very different compared to Away and Flow. There's no synopsis yet, but we do know it's going to have dialogue, it's going to have a blend of human and animal characters, and he believes it should be out in 3 years, which is a lot quicker compared to Away and Flow. The thing about Limbo I'm most intrigued about is that it's going to have an extremely unique art style. And according to him from this article by Mexican news site 24 Horas, he states, "It's very ambitious and complicated. We're going to make something very immersive. Tell me your movie's got a unique art style and I will be seated." But I suppose while I wait for that, I can watch and rewatch Away and Flow in the meantime. And you can too. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and join my Patreon, and I will see you later. Goodbye! So what's Gin's next movie? Well, it's called Flow. No, it's not.